right, so welcome everybody to Superior Gloves webinar, How One Decision Reduced an Auto Plant's Hand Injuries by 50%. So my name is Matt Burtney. I'll be your host for the day, and we're joined by Alex Blair of DuPont Kevlar and Derek Coughlin of Superior Glove. So Alex Blair has been working for DuPont Kevlar for the last 15 years as the business development manager who specializes in automotive and metal fabrication. Mr. Blair holds a bachelor's degree in business and commerce from Appalachian State University and is a licensed qualified safety sales professional. And our very own Derek Coughlin, so he's worked in the safety industry for nearly 2 decades, and he's responsible for growing Superior Glove's automotive and metal division, consulting on product innovations and presenting solutions to customers. So the hand consists of 27 bones. There's lots of opportunity for injuries. OSHA reports that nearly 320,000 disabling hand injuries occurred in 2013 across all industries. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, over 200,000 of those injuries were in the private sector. More than 1 million visits to the ER each year are a result of hand injuries, and according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, each hand injury now averages around $6,000 in costs and results in 6 days missed work. So I'm going to hand it over to Alex from DuPont Kevlar to talk a little bit about the contender glove here.
Thanks, Matt. Hello, everyone on the call. I appreciate everyone attending and the opportunity to talk a little bit about the automotive industry and cut-resistant gloves made of Kevlar through Superior Glove. In particular, the glove that we have highlighted here is the SKG CXPS, and it's an interesting, unique glove that was designed specifically for a certain automotive end-user account, which is now actually, we have other wear trials in place. This glove is a unique combination of Kevlar as well as glass and also some other synthetic fibers. The fibers themselves are filament-based yarns which perform very well for cut but also abrasion. This glove is also pre-shrunk and comes with a reinforced thumb crotch for added protection in the thumb crotch area. It is tested to an ANSI level A7, which is the new standard level, with over 4,200 grams of cut, and this glove has done very well in wear trials, in particular at a recent automotive, large automotive company here domestically in the U.S. And it comes in multiple sizes, of course, extra small all the way through extra large, and it's very comfortable to the hand. It breathes very well. It is considered a 7-gauge knitted product, so that gives you an idea of the gauge and the thickness. It has a very good hand, very good comfort level, and it does wash very, very well in repeated laundry cycles without any type of degradation from cut, abrasion, or comfort or feel.
Perfect.
Next slide.
Yeah, so we will head over now and talk a little bit about what happened at this automotive plant.
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, we were actually contacted by a large automotive end user here domestically that produces SUVs in the United States to address some of their issues with hand protection. And we also coordinated this inquiry through distribution. An on-site distributor was handling the account. The goal of the end user was to address above and higher than normal glove usage as it related to a recent change to a certain glove in their stamping and press department. So they wanted to look in to see why they were having such a high glove usage, and in particular they were also having injuries. They continued to have lacerations even though the glove product was supposedly a higher level of cut than what they had previously been using. So they asked for assistance from a team from DuPont, Superior Glove, as well as the distribution channel. It was an on-site integrator to come in, assess the situation, and then go through and what we call a wear trial with gloves to determine on what the issue was. Okay, next slide. So what did we do and how did we do it? first of all, we had to have buy-in from everyone and all the parties at the automotive plant. And of course, management had reached out to ask for some assistance through the distribution channel. We also decided that it would be in our best interest to also include the laundry service, who actually launders the products, determine, to really determine what is the best, what's the issue, what are we trying to find, what are the employees saying, what's the issue, why are the gloves not lasting long. So what we did was we coordinated a wear trial with the distributor on site, chose several wear trial dates. We attended the plant team from DuPont as well as from Superior, as well as the distributor, and we brought in samples to the stamping facility, the stamping area, and got buy-in from not only from the upper management, also the area managers, to go out on the plant floor, talk to the employees, the associates that were actually wearing the PPE, and conduct some interviews one-on-one with those employees to determine on what their likes, their dislikes, what the issues were with the hand, not only with the hand protection, but also with the arm protection. So after we conducted those interviews, we provided the employees with the SKG CXPS samples, and under the intent that they would wear the gloves for the entire shift or until they failed, if they did fail. And then after the shift was over, we asked them to fill out a survey response card for feedback. And there were certain criteria and questions that were asked, everything regarding cut protection, comfort level, abrasion protection, did they like the glove better, worse, or the same. After the shift was over, we collected the gloves, then we extracted those gloves, took those gloves, and shipped them directly to the launderer, who was aware that we were going to be providing the gloves. They in turn washed them in the same wash cycle that they normally do the current incumbent gloves, and then ship those gloves back to the plant, to the facility, to go through the same scenario and the same wave and wear cycle process. Before the gloves were shipped back, several gloves from the launderer, several of the gloves were extracted from the wear trial sampling and shipped to DuPont's technical services, where we perform cut tests to prove and show to DuPont, or to the end user, that there was no degradation after repeated wash cycles. This scenario was conducted 2 times, but continues, but the wear trial continues, and actually the company now is already completely converted to this product as a result of the findings. So it was a very good scenario. It turned out very well, and there are certain criteria what we found. You can go to the next slide, Matt. What we uncovered basically was the fact that the gloves that they had gone to, the incumbent gloves, were in fact less expensive, was one of the main drivers why the decision was made to go to the product, but also supposedly that it was a certain cut level. We found the gloves at certain points in the life cycle were some were higher in cut, some were lower in cut, so they were very inconsistent in the level of protection, not only from the cycles but also the glove itself. Certain areas of the glove would have higher levels of cut than others. So what we found was, after doing the wear trial, that the employees were complaining of continual shrinkage of the gloves. So that would force them to actually wear gloves that were too small, and that would put undue stress on the gloves when they would put it on their hands, and make the glove fail prematurely. They would also spend quite a bit of time just going through the glove samples and the gloves inventory to find gloves that would fit, which was taking time for them preparing to do other things with their job. So we found a lot of folks complaining about the shrinkage issue, and so the gloves, were failing prematurely. Most employees were wearing 2 to 3 gloves per shift, and they were really failing in the thumb crotch area, right there between the thumb and the index finger. And so the SKG CXPS that we sampled, of course, addressed that area quite heavily with an added reinforcement of Kevlar. So we uncovered the facts, and we put all this data together in a nice presentation to the end user, And of course, that data was massaged by them, and then some decisions were made based on our findings. So if you want to go to the next slide. So here we were faced, basically the situation was, okay, they're using a lower cost glove, but it's failing prematurely. Their costs actually have gone up higher than they were when they were using the previous glove. So as a result of the wear trial, the decision was made to go to the higher performing glove, which is the SKG CXPS. What was proven through the wear trial is that they could actually spend more money for a glove and also possibly a sleeve, as long as they would get longer wear life. And that's the whole message that we sell to the end user market, especially automotive, is that these gloves should not be treated as a one and done or even two and done. It should they're designed and manufactured to be used and reused for protection without degradation through the life cycle. The cost savings that we came up with just on price alone was well over $50,000 just in glove cost. That doesn't take into consideration the reduction of injuries and lacerations, which Matt mentioned earlier can be up to $6,000, which actually is very conservative. It's really more than that, and that also doesn't take into consideration the fact that the nuisance cuts, the nuisance injuries that don't go reported, those would also be reduced by using the proper glove. So it's a value proposition that really makes sense, and it really, in order to do, I think the success that we had at this end user was because it was a total team effort, and we took the time and the effort to work with that end user and handle the whole entire wear trial from the beginning all the way to the end, to the order point. And it also, too, one of the costs that we can't put into our cost calculator or into any of our analysis is the increased productivity that this end user would achieve through better worker acceptance, but also better dexterity and just overall better glove performance. And it's just been a win-win situation for everyone involved. So, next slide, I think. Okay. Derek?
Great. So I guess when we talk about cut levels, I'm sure everybody's aware that the standard has changed, gone from 1 to 5 now to 1 to 9, just to spread out and make it better for the end user in terms of finding the right gloves. We find that a lot of the glove standards, or a lot of cut levels now, are hitting the A4 level. Seems to be a more acceptable level these days, as opposed back in the day it was more like a cut level 2. So that standard from 4 to 5 was a huge spread, and what they've done, they've spread it out now from 1 to 9 as opposed to 1 to 5, and we can go through that. On our website, we talk about the different standards and how it's changed. So I won't bore everybody too much with it and how that's changed, but higher isn't always better, and that's kind of the idea that we're kind of talking about today, especially with what Alex had mentioned about the wear trials and what have you, and what we actually found out. So when I know when I go into a plant, part of the strategy is to go in there and look at consolidation. Consolidation also helps save costs. As opposed to buying 10 different gloves and having, Mike and Peter wear different gloves and, stocking and having, if you can consolidate into 2 or 3, obviously from a purchasing standpoint, it's much more effective and cost savings for sure. And also the purchasers will love it as well. So some tricks of the trade when we're looking at gloves. I know I can speak to Alex. I work with Alex quite a bit. But when we talk about laundering gloves, that obviously saves costs. But some other ways of, if you don't have a laundering program or somebody that's there to manage the glove business, you can implement in your company, give a glove to to get a glove situation. We go into a lot of companies where, the employees are able just to grab 14 or 15 pairs of gloves at a time and just take them. That obviously increases costs significantly. And a lot of, we go through plants and we see gloves all over the floor. So from a purchasing standpoint, obviously they're going to go through a lot more gloves. So that's just one aspect of it. But to talk about what Alex had mentioned too about abrasion levels, that's kind of come forward a lot more in the industry, whereas before people were going cheaper, but then also trying to wash it. Well, that doesn't really go, doesn't really work in the big picture. And the reason why is because the glove wears out prematurely. We find that if you have a glove that has a really low abrasion level, obviously they're going to wear the glove before it even can be washed. So if you're looking at a laundering program, obviously we want to increase the abrasion levels. Obviously cut is very important as well. And again, to allude to what Alex said about the degradation in laundering of an inferior product maybe that doesn't meet a certain standard, you're going to lose some cut and obviously put your employees at risk. So then when we look at a laundering program, obviously with the new gloves out there, things have changed a bit too. There's a lot more synthetic fibers in it, which add to the cut level. And so you also have to then work hand in hand with your laundry company, much like we did at that example plant that Alex was mentioning, and give them washing instructions on gloves. A properly washed glove will outlast something that's washed not, within spec of the manufacturer. So, you could get maybe potentially another 3 or 4 washes out of a glove that's laundered properly, as opposed to just hitting it with a bunch of heat. So again, that's a team effort. Again, like Alec was saying, it goes from the person on the floor all the way up to management, into the laundering, into the distribution. It's a big community, I guess you could say. So if we look at examples of the old way of doing gloves, and one of the gloves that we still see a lot out there, of course, and it'll never go away, is leather gloves. I know we've been into many companies where people are using leather gloves as cut gloves, and as a company, we don't really classify anything other than an engineered yarn like a Kevlar as being cut wristing gloves. So we have different examples of why maybe a leather is kind of inferior to maybe a synthetic product that would give more longevity. Leather doesn't wash up very well. It dries out very quickly. So when it comes to costing, these are the hidden costs that kind of we're talking about. So these are the things you have to kind of consider when you're looking at your overall glove program. Generally, a leather glove will be 10 times more expensive than an engineered fiber glove, because the engineered fiber glove can be washed a lot more. So then reducing your cost by 30%, plus by another 70% in the hidden costs. So when we're looking at gloves, we just have to make sure we choose appropriately. And that's where your glove company could come in and assess the situation. We look at the different areas within the plant and come with maybe a good, better, and best situation, and get buy-in from everybody. Get buy-in from the unions, get buy-in from the management, and also the end user. That's most important, because they're the ones who are going to be wearing the gloves all day. So you want to make sure that they're comfortable, they're obviously well protected, they meet all the criteria. Then you can look at how that's going to work in terms of a laundry program and what have you. So really what you want to do is you want to check from everything. So you want to look at your current situation. Look, what can we improve, or where are we getting the problems? Where are we getting the cuts? Where is there oil in one application, or is there somewhere we can look to improve that? So once we get all the information, obviously, and we did it at that example that Alex was mentioning, but we then look at things to avoid and take out of the equation. And then from there, we come up with a solution. So the solution is we either we can develop a glove, or we find the right glove for the right situation and and make sure they're comfortable and what have you. And then from there, that's where we don't stop. And that's the kind of the key in the whole situation, is that you want to make sure you follow up all the time, because you can implement something and it may not work for everybody, and you're definitely not going to please everybody, but the idea is to obviously get as much buy-in as possible. So you want to constantly be following up with it, even asking your distributor, what's new out there, even, showing new products and what have you always helps keep safety first and in the front. So in the end, you just want to make sure you get the best product for the situation you're in. The bottom line is you want to make sure that your hand injuries go down. You want to make sure your costing's in line, especially I can speak to the automotive industry. They're very focused on cost, and they want to make sure that they are lean and mean, so to speak. Consolidate your gloves. Create a laundry program if it can work for you. Find the gloves that fit your employees and the ones that they actually want to wear, instead of just saying, here, that's it, because that never usually ends up working in the end. And don't be afraid to ask for help. Your distributor's there to help. We're, as a company, always there and ready to help. So, leave like that.
Perfect. All right, so now we're going to take a few questions and answers from Alex and Derek. So we invite anyone who is listening, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. We got a few come in already. And so first question for you there, Alex. Should gloves and sleeves ever be used more than once?
Absolutely. If it makes sense for the application. If it's being used for cut resistance and it's not been exposed to chemicals, chemical resistant gloves that are exposed oftentimes are treated as a one and done. But when it comes to like a knitted type cut resistant product with it being Kevlar and as well as a sleeve, we sell on the fact that the gloves are highly reusable and highly launderable, and it's part of the value proposition, as I mentioned earlier. Some people use these as a one and done when, in a sense, they really can be used multiple times, and I highly recommend that they do that.
And following up on that question, with Kevlar in particular, since that's a bit of your wheelhouse, what's the kind of washing instructions for Kevlar in general?
DuPont Kevlar can be laundered in a wash cycle, water wash, or a dry cleaning process. Both are approved by DuPont, and both are performed throughout the industry. Certain manufacturers or launderers prefer water wash, and others would like or prefer a solvent-based dry cleaning type process. Both are very effective. The key to laundering a Kevlar-based aramid type product is that you need to be careful and not to use any type of bleach agent or water or any type of softeners. And most of your industrial launderers that service the auto industry and the industrial market in general know this and have actually really done a really good job over the last several years in not only perfecting how to wash knitted products but also coated products, which at one time were very often treated as used and then thrown away because they felt like they couldn't be laundered. Several launderers that I've been involved with now have really done a really good job with tweaking their wash cycle and also their drying process to where it really protects the glove and they can get added value and added usage out of those types of products.
Perfect. And question for you here, Derek. Will more expensive gloves last longer?
That's a good question, because you know what, I found over the years that things have gotten pretty inexpensive, and we're no different than most companies out there. We've kind of went with the rule of people asking us for really inexpensive gloves, but I'm taking a different approach this year and definitely going with the more expensive. It doesn't necessarily mean the most expensive gloves can last the longest, but as we talked about in the slides, we want to make sure what's in the glove has a, the DuPont Kevlar and something that we know is going to wash it well, but also meets the criteria. So when you look at abrasion levels, if you've got a very high abrasive application, you definitely want to make sure that you have materials in there that are going to combat the high abrasion, which in turn will give you longer washes. We also want to make sure that the products that are in the gloves that are being washed, for instance, are not going to shrink. So you have to have tried and true products for that very reason. So in most cases, I would say yes, a more expensive glove is going to last longer if you're going to wash it. If you're going to spend more on a really expensive glove and not wash it, then you're probably not going to see the benefit of it, that's for sure.
And kind of following up on that, the washing, for you, Alex, does washing gloves ever affect the glove's cut level?
If it's washed properly, no. It should not affect and if it's washed properly and the glove is actually properly engineered, the yarn's properly engineered, and the construction of the glove, the knit is a really strong, compact knit, it should not affect the cut resistance at all.
Perfect. All right, and here we have one for you, Derek. Are there glove offerings that can reduce or minimize double gloving? And maybe for those who may not be familiar, explain what double gloving is as well.
Sure, that used to be a big practice in the automotive industry, and it's still used actually. A lot of people out there think that if they take a cut level 2 glove and they wear another cut level 2 glove over it, they actually get a cut level 4. But actually that's not the case at all. It's still going to be a cut level 2. So in the olden days, before the engineered fibers, and we can kind of talk about engineered fibers for a long time, but basically essentially what Alex had talked about, adding some glass or some steel and whatever added to Kevlar product is going to increase the level of a glove. So you could have a really thin glove that has a lot of engineered fibers in it that is far more cut resistant than something that's 3 times as thick. So when it comes to technology, it kind of leads the whole process, especially right now in these day and age, for sure.
Perfect. And I'll leave the next one up, whoever wants to answer it. Are there other variables outside of PPE considered and acted on to reduce hand lacerations and other injuries?
Alex, maybe you want to talk about that, or?
Well, ask the question again, Matt. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So are there other variables outside of PPE to consider and act on when reducing hand lacerations and injuries?
Well, oftentimes the first and best case scenario to reduce a hand laceration is to engineer the hazard out of the application. And then if you can't, then of course you have to work on determining a glove that would work for those applications. So that would be one of the variables. And then of course, a lot of the other variables would be the dexterity that's required, and also what types of, not only from a cut perspective and abrasion perspective, but snagging. Is there issues that could possibly, present a hazard from a snagging perspective? And also, we've not talked anything about heat, which is very prevalent in an automotive environment, especially on the rough end where they're stamping and they're also what they call body weld. So you also have to, that's another variable in choosing your glove selection in your sleeve, is what type of exposure you're going to have to heat. And is that, is it spark, is it weld slag, is it open flame? All those have to be taken into consideration.
Perfect. And a question on leather for you here, Derek. Is there any synthetic leather that holds up? Pardon me, we've lost the question.
That's the welding question then.
There we go. Is there a synthetic alternative that can hold up better and cut costs through laundering or improve cut abrasion resistance?
Well, when it comes to welding gloves, it's kind of a different bit of a ball game, but there's different leathers to consider when you're talking welding as well. as an example, I mean, that's a pretty broad question, but as a good example, you could, if it allows, you could change from, let's say, a cowhide to a goat grain leather, which goat grain leather is probably 3 to 4 times more abrasion resistant than regular leather. So that could in turn, pay a little more, again, as we talk about, to reduce your overall cost. Now, when it comes to washing leather, you have to be very careful. And that's where you would have to talk to your launderer to make sure that they have the capabilities to wash leather properly and not degrade it over time. So that's a hard one, but right now, I mean, we have some synthetic palms on some of our welding products. I can only talk about our product, obviously, but we have some synthetic leather palms, which would help definitely in the abrasion, even though leather is very good for abrasion, but it also gives the longevity, better grip, So that's something that maybe contact your distributor. They can contact us or wherever they use, or wherever you guys use, and we can you can look at different alternatives for sure.
And here's a question for the both of you. In terms of industry trends for the automotive industry, what do you kind of see being those big trends for 2017?
Well, go ahead, Alex. Maybe you want to go first?
I see, depending on what type of product they're manufacturing, obviously the SUV truck market continues to grow, and so the facilities that are producing those type vehicles are adding capacity. But you also see, the passenger car industry is actually increasing production, even though their sales now might not be quite as solid. But the trend as far as hand protection is, these plants are adding more people, and they're asking for gloves that increase their protection without increasing their cost, and also they would like to use products that are thinner, that enable them to have a better durability and better grip. Also, some of the trends that I see are folks, end users, asking for lower linting products that don't contaminate as the product goes through the manufacturing process through to the paint area and on through to the final assembly area, which is very, very costly, very expensive. So anything that can help contribute or minimize those types of concerns is an added plus, and that seems to be what I'm seeing a lot of.
And I echo that as well. I think a lot of people now are looking for, higher dexterity, more maneuverable. The stamping industry has changed quite a bit too. They're stamping really fine parts now. They want, more dexterity, the little parts to work with. So I see, definitely thinner, but the higher cut levels for sure. I think, in the old days, I always saw maybe a cut level 2 as being the standard. Now I see more like cut level 4 is the standard. So thinner and higher cut for sure.
Yeah, and in addition to that, I'd add too, we see more and more end users, especially for their maintenance, electricians, skilled trade folks, looking for gloves that have the cut protection needed, dexterity, but also now integrating arc flash protection and FR protection. And the beauty of that, of course, being Kevlar is protective from FR, and there are options out there now that weren't there 5-10 years ago. And also, too, customers looking now not only for the hand protection for arc, but also sleeve and arm protection that would be used in conjunction with their ensemble that they wear, their arc flash clothing.
Okay, perfect. And I'd like to thank everyone who's been submitting questions. We're getting a great response here from you guys. Question for you, Derek. So the question is, how do you recommend we test a glove against a sharp surface, such as rebar, without putting an employee at risk during the test?
I think you can start by, again, if we look at what slides we're talking about, is kind of assess where the issue is first. Look at maybe where you're having some problems, and then look at gloves that may attack that problem even before you even put it on their hand. So, for instance, what Alex talked about, the reinforcing the thumb. If you're using a glove, I'll use that as a scenario that doesn't have a reinforcement, and you're finding you're getting cuts in the thumb. Well, a simple way to fix that is just put a reinforcement in the thumb. So I would suggest looking at, you know, having your distributor come in and doing a glove audit, or having one of us come in and do a glove audit, and just looking at the situation and understanding what the problem is first before you you test anything. You know, obviously everything has to be controlled. You don't want to put anybody at risk to do that. But I think just by looking at your situation and seeing what possibly is out there to help that before you even get down to that would be your best start.
And then for you, Alex, we have a lady asking, she's the purchasing manager of a metals company that has several metal recycling yards. We've been using gloves with a high level cut and puncture resistance. And basically, she wants to look at the difference between the new ANSI standards versus the CE certifications. What's the difference between those two?
Yeah, we can provide that information to her if she needs it. Just if she would like to reach out to us, we can get her that information.
Fair enough. It's a lot of explanation for a short amount of time that we have here today.
Yes, it is. Yeah, but now the new standard does incorporate puncture resistance into the new standards, whereas before it was not. And we are getting more and more inquiries about puncture protection. You know, not only industrial applications, but also waste management, also law enforcement, military. You know. It runs the gamut. But the issue in the past has been, in order to get a glove that has puncture resistance, the glove, one, becomes very expensive because it's multi-materials and a lot of labor involved, and also, too, the issue becomes you lose a lot of dexterity. However, there are a lot of new products out there that address puncture.
Absolutely. And we were talking earlier about how the best glove isn't necessarily the highest level of cut protection. And so this will be for either one of you guys. You can both answer if you have different feelings towards the question. But what sort of application or task would justify a cut level A8 or A9 glove?
That would obviously depend on what they're doing. But I've been into metal recycling yards that need a very high cut level glove. They're dealing with many different sharp parts, and it being fairly new standard out there to hit that kind of level, we haven't had a lot of requests at this point. But anything obviously super sharp. You know, you're going to deal in razor blades, and if they're sliding their hand along something like a razor blade, obviously you need the highest cut possible. And one thing we got to make sure that we clarify is that just because it's an A8 or an A9 doesn't mean it's cut proof. You know, it means it's cut resistant. So we still have to be careful no matter what.
One thing to add too is as the auto industry works toward finding products are building their vehicles to reach certain mileage requirements, emission requirements, they're trying to make the vehicles lighter. In doing so, they're using thinner and thinner gauge metal, aluminum, and other types of materials, and oftentimes they're even thinner. So the metal's getting thinner and thinner, but sharper and sharper. And so, you know, something like an A8 and A9 might be used in a certain area of a plant that produces the underbody of the vehicle, which is one of the more hazardous areas, or the what they call the A pillar or B pillar for those that are automotive folks. But then your A8 and A9, something like that, also too, you've got to look at industries that for food processing would also probably use some of the higher end cut resistant products because of using sharp knives to process whatever type of meat that they may be processing.
Perfect. And a little bit more back to the laundering side of things. Can coated gloves, so like a palm coated glove, for instance, can that be laundered?
Yes, for sure. You can launder coated products. Obviously, anything that's coated is not going to maybe stand up to multiple washes, like, for instance, our SKGC because the coating will tend to start degrading and peeling and stuff at the time. But you could, with, again, a good laundering company, you could get maybe 3-4 washes, and it depends on the type of work they're doing. If they're in really sharp areas and they're cutting it up, obviously the laundry will degrade the glove quicker in that route as well. So that's one thing we didn't really touch on. I think if you are going to look at a laundering company, look at one that is going to do the best job, not the cheapest, much like we're talking about gloves, same thing.
And a little bit more on the washing side of things. Should cut-resistant gloves and sleeves, is it expected that they should shrink after a washing? I'll pass this one over to you, Alex.
Normally you are going to see some type of shrinkage, some more than others. A lot of it depends on obviously the fiber composition of the glove, but also the quality of the glove and the knit. And for instance, the XKG CXPS is actually manufactured oversized and then actually pre-washed to shrink it down to actually, so it's pre-washed and pre-shrunk. But you will see some tightening of the fibers. But if it's if it's a quality product and the yarn's is a good quality engineered yarn or just a non-engineered yarn for that matter, it should hold up very well and you should see minimal shrinkage.
And typically, or approximately, I guess, how many times can a glove be washed?
And that's a question that there's no true answer to it. There's so many variables that are involved with a glove and or a sleeve or any type of PPE that is designed to be reused. We'd like to think, I've seen gloves go through as many as 20 cycles. But as few as 1 or 2, and a lot of it depends. Like I said, it depends on the application, the composition of the glove, the quality of the glove, the knit, and then also the laundry process. And one of the questions that I always ask, and I know Derek does the same, is when I go to an end user that's experiencing issues with high glove usage and cuts and lacerations, I ask them the question: how many cycles are you getting out of your gloves? 9 times out of 10, they don't really know. And so that's where your distributor, the launderer, glove manufacturer, fiber producer, whoever, as a team can drill down and really determine on, okay, let's determine how many turns you're really getting out of these gloves. And oftentimes it's not as many as they think it is. And so that would be, something to really consider.
All right, perfect. And then we have a question coming in here that I'll pass over to Derek about puncture resistance. So the asker asks, we see more than a few wire punctures. Periodically, they even require stitches. So wearability is an issue. Our employees work 12-hour shifts in relatively warm and humid environments. So is there anything that you could suggest for them to look at for gloves?
Well, again, I think it sounds like when it comes to punctures, again, like cut resistance, most gloves are only puncture resistant. If you had something that was puncture proof, obviously it's going to probably not be very comfortable. So again, when it comes to the ratings, there's really, if you boil it right down to the nitty gritty, you're looking at either a hypodermic needle puncture resistant glove, or you're looking at like a stelio type puncture resistant, which would be much thicker, maybe a little like a pencil, that kind of thing, as opposed to a needle. So maybe look at more, if you're not already, look at the hypodermic needle puncture rated gloves, as opposed to maybe if you're just using a coated glove. A lot of people use a latex coated glove, and it gives some good puncture, but it wouldn't give that next level of puncture. It has to be rated. So, and again, that's something we can get into and we'll probably talk a little longer on it. But again, I would ask your distributor just to show you some different options. You can call us. We can also give you some options, and even our website has a lot of tools for that as well. So,
perfect. Thanks very much, Derek. So we talked a lot in this webinar today about hand protection. We didn't have as much time to talk about sleeve protection, but we have a great question here about arm protection. What would you recommend in regards to sleeves for arm protection in metal and automotive plants? And Derek and Alex, you can both probably give your 2 cents on this one.
Well, again, like when we're talking about gloves, I think, especially in the metal industry, a lot of people go really high cut level glove, but then they kind of maybe go a lower cut level sleeve. Yeah, I think if in my opinion, if you're using a cut level 4 or a 5 or an A7 glove, you got to try and find the highest cut level you can in the sleeve. So again, assessing the situation. If you're handling some really sharp parts and your body handling it, I guess, so to speak, then you got to look at something that's going to obviously work for the environment. So.
Perfect. And then a question that probably the both of you hate to get, but is asked fairly often. What palm coating works best in oily conditions?
I can answer that. We've traditionally foam nitrile would be a good, like, it basically absorbs the oil. And it's like almost like I always treat it like a piece of bread where it just soaks into the glove. But there's new coatings out there. We have a nitrile based. It's almost like there'd be like suction cups that would attach to the surface and dissipate the oil, and it wouldn't necessarily sink into the glove. So you're going to keep your hands definitely cleaner. So there's a lot of different coatings, but foam nitrile is probably the industry standard right now. But some of the shortfalls of foam nitrile would be it's going to wear quicker. So if you have a high abrasion area, the foam nitrile, because there's more air in it, you're going to wear quicker. So there's other alternatives, that's for sure. And we can talk about that with your distributor.
Absolutely. Now, this is a question for Alex here, and there may be a little bit of bias, but the question is, what has better cut resistance? Is that Kevlar or Dyneema?
Kevlar does. On an equal weight basis, 100% Kevlar versus Dyneema, Kevlar does by far. Yeah, and then also too, you have to think, you have to put into perspective too. Not only do you get cut protection, but you also get the thermal properties. So if there's an area of a plant, that could have both hazards, you should always lean towards the Kevlar-based product. And in laundry cycles, I see that Kevlar tends to launder better. It can handle the heat of going through a drying process much better.
Perfect. And Derek, so we kind of opened a can of worms, I guess, with the ANSI versus CE ratings. This question is, what would a typical leather glove have as an ANSI or a CE rating?
All right. Well, we asked this question quite a bit, and I've been to many plants where they're using a leather glove as a cut. They're handling really sharp metals and what have you. But if you think about leather and what it actually is, well, leather is basically skin. And if you look at your own skin on your hand, leather's not very good for cut, or your skin's not very good for cut resistance. So when we look at leather in the whole hierarchy of cut, basically you have leather would be below cotton gloves, for instance. So then you have your engineered fibers above that. You'd have Kevlar and all the other type of fibers as well. So leather is like right at the bottom. Latex would be with leather probably in terms of cut resistance. But again, your skin's not very cut resistant, so either is leather.
And so that probably wouldn't even make it on to the ANSI or the CE ratings for cut resistance.
Anything will have a cut resistance to it, but we wouldn't classify it as a cut. And again, if you just use that principle of your skin, you wouldn't handle a sharp part with a bare hand. So again, that's kind of the way you can look at it.
And a question for you, Alex, about gauges. The question is pretty simple: do the gloves come in different thicknesses?
Oh yeah, gloves come in different thicknesses, different gauges. Is oftentimes how people refer to a glove thickness is by the gauge. And like the SKG CXPS, that is considered a 7 gauge. But I mentioned earlier that you see a lot of gloves getting thinner and thinner with engineered yarn, so you're getting 13 gauge, 15 gauge, even 18, and talk of 20 gauge gloves. And the higher the gauge, the thinner the glove. And then also too, you've got some industries, some automotive plants, especially press lines and stamping areas, where they still use what they call terry cloth gloves, loop-out terry cloth gloves, which are, a loop terry product is almost like a bath towel type material. You've got loops that give added protection. So yes, they come in multiple thicknesses, different weights, ounces per square yard. Usually terry cloth is sold like a 24-ounce terry, which would be ounces per square yard.
Perfect. And to clarify as well for the person asking, the SKGCXPS only comes in the one size, so only be coming in the 7 gauge. Question for yourself here, Derek, another one of these situational ones. So a lot of the hand injuries that this gentleman is finding are minor cuts from the edge of stainless steel sheet metal from the assembling and the final product. So the main common complaint is that users don't like how bulky their fingertips feel. They end up removing the gloves to handle small parts from the sharp edges. What would you suggest would be best suited for this?
Well, we do have, again, talking about our product, but we do have an 18 gauge Kevlar glove that has a polyurethane coating on it. So there's kind of two sections to this answer, and one is you have to look at the coating, and the other one is you have to look at the base fiber. So if we start with Kevlar as the base fiber and go as thin as possible to be as close to not having the glove on, but still offer like a cut level 3 protection. But then you've got to add the coating, which will give them the grip on those small little parts. But it'll also help with punctures. So a lot of people ask that question, like, I'm getting a lot of cuts, but then we ask, well, is it a puncture or is it a slice? So you have to kind of define what the issue is. If puncture is more of an issue, polyurethane probably wouldn't be the best for that. If it's more of a slice or so that type of thing, polyurethane probably could work for that. So that's again something you can talk to your distributor about, or call us. We can give you some different examples of some gloves that you can try.
Perfect. And just in terms of superior glove in general there, Derek, one person asks, I work for a national multi-site manufacturer. How many sales reps does Superior have in Canada to support my locations?
We're located all over North America. We're in Europe. So just give one of us a call, and we can definitely have somebody help you out. No problem. So we're in the States. We're in South America. We're right across Canada, right across the States. So we can help anybody. That's for sure.
And another question for you here, Alex, regarding Kevlar. The person asks, does Kevlar break down when exposed to UV light?
No, it does not. And that has been, people have been concerned with that for years, because Kevlar, when exposed to UV light, does discolor slightly. However, it does not affect the performance level of Kevlar in any form or fashion. And also some of our newer Kevlar filament-based type products and now handle UV better than your spun or staple-based type products, which do very well. And then also too, another question, or I don't think a lot of folks know, is that Kevlar, when people think of Kevlar, they think yellow, and Kevlar comes in many, many, many colors now, and not only just your standard colors, but high vis is also, which is another trend that we didn't mention earlier. So yeah, it's no issue with UV.
Perfect. Now we have time for about one more question, but before we ask that, just want to remind everyone, we have been getting a couple of questions whether this presentation will be available later on, and it certainly will be. So for everyone who has registered, we'll send out a copy of it with the slide deck, so you can go and review on your own time if you're a little bit busier today. And our last question, another one for Derek here, a situational thing. So our mechanics need finger-like dexterity for threading small screws. Is it ever allowed to cut the palm, tip, or index, middle, or thumb fingers of the glove? Our mechanics are removing entire gloves to accomplish these high dexterity tasks.
Superior as a company actually have gloves that have the fingers taken off. We sell a lot of gloves like that to people using drills, for instance. We don't promote gloves when you're handling a drill bit, because we don't want the glove to get sucked into the drill bit and obviously affect the safety of the employee. So if obviously that's a health and safety issue from a corporate standpoint. You guys will have to deal with. But I've been into many plants where the fingers are cut off. You can do that for sure, but we have gloves that are. The other thing is, like, are you washing them? Because if you're going to cut the fingers off your gloves and you're going to wash them, it may not stand up. So in order to do it properly, you have to make sure it's seamed properly, and so it has some longevity. So again, we want to make sure that the employee is well protected. Make sure there's no drills or that type of thing being used. I know there's some new products coming out there, but I think that what you're talking about is taking the fingers off would definitely help for sure, as long as it meets the company's requirements.
Perfect. And I got another one for you here, Alex. It seems a little bit interesting. I don't want to leave it just yet. What information do you have to help someone make the jump from cotton or leather to a material like Kevlar? How can you justify the cost?
Well, we have a lot of resources. In particular, we recently developed what we call the Kevlar cost calculator. You could use it for other types of gloves, but we use that at the end user that I mentioned earlier. That takes into consideration, someone using a cotton or a leather glove versus a Kevlar-based glove. And we have all kinds of technical data, both online and then also hard copies. So yeah, and also too, our lab services, our technical lab services, we do a lot of benchmark, a lot of testing of our own product, obviously, but we do a lot of competitive analysis, but also our own internal products. We have customers that are using Kevlar-based products that will send gloves to our lab to periodically test and to make sure that they are meeting the requirements they have. So we can do the same thing for cotton and leather or any type of product.
Perfect.
Yeah, and we're more than happy to provide any of that information if needed.
Excellent. And so we've been getting a few different questions about this glove that we've been talking about today, the SKX GCP itself, and just a little gift for those who stayed on to the end. So if you go to superiorglove.com to request a sample of this glove, and link is at the main part of the homepage. So we'd like to thank everyone for coming out today. Again, we will be going and emailing that information out with the webinar and the slide deck. And so thank you to Alex and Derek for spending the last hour with us to go through the automotive plant and trends that you guys have been seeing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nicely done. Thank you very much.